Ram, Ram, Hari, Ram, Ram, Hari, 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 Krishna, Hari, Krishna, Krishna, Hari, 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 Ram, Hari, Ram. So we're okay to start, yeah? Yeah. Okay. Okay, we start. Zakrit. Zvukta. Neruskam. Okay, Hare Krishna devotees. Hari Bol. Very nice to be with you again. And absorbing ourselves in the mercy of Srila Prabhupada. Okay. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharne Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pastyachyadesh Tarne Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Sri Advaita Gadadha Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Vanchikalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhyeva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. So, devotees, we're in the first chapter, of course, of Prabhupada-lilamrita. We're just beginning. And we're reading about Srila Prabhupada's early childhood life. We read about his father, his relationship with his father, who was a great devotee. I think it's in the beginning of the Krishna book, if I'm not mistaken, that Srila Prabhupada dedicates the book to his father, Gormohan Dey. And Prabhupada says he was a pure devotee of Krishna. So definitely Srila Prabhupada's father was a very, very special person. And then the description moved on to his relationship with his mother. And we're in the middle of that right now. So let's continue on from where we left off last night. So, his mother would often take him to the Ganges and personally bathe him. She also gave him a food supplement known as Horlicks. You know Horlicks? I know Horlicks too. It's quite nice, actually. So she also gave him a food supplement known as Horlicks. When he got dysentery, she cured him with hot puris and fried eggplant with salt. Hot puris with fried brinjal with salt. Sounds nice, actually. Though sometimes when he was ill, Abai would show his obstinacy by refusing to take any medicine. But just as he was stubborn, his mother was determined, and she would forcibly administer medicine into his mouth. Though sometimes it took 3 assistants to hold him down. Hari Bol. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So a quote from Prabhupada. I was very naughty when I was a boy. I would break anything. When I was angry, I would break the glass hookah pipes which my father kept to offer to guests. Once my mother was trying to bathe me and I refused and knocked my head on the ground and blood came out. They came running and said, "What are you doing? You shall kill the child." The people are blaming his mother. But the hookah pipes, yeah, you get them in India. Gosh, I don't know what they would smoke in them, but I mean, anyway, whatever. It's all bad news, actually. Abai was present when his mother observed the ceremony of Sadahotra during the 7th and 9th months of her pregnancies. Freshly bathed, she would appear in new clothing along with her children and enjoy a feast of whatever foods she desired, while her husband gave goods in charity to the local Brahmins, who chanted mantras for the purification of the mother and the coming child. Abai was completely dependent on his mother. Sometimes she would put his shirt on backwards, and he would simply accept it without mentioning it. Although he was sometimes stubborn, he felt dependent on the guidance and reassurance of his mother. When he had to go to the toilet, he would jump up and down beside her, holding her sari and saying, "Urine, mother, urine." "Who is stopping you?" she would ask. "Yes, you can go." Only then, with her permission, would he go. Sometimes in the intimacy of dependence, his mother became his foil. When he lost a baby tooth and on her advice placed it under a pillow that night, the tooth vanished and some money appeared. Abai gave the money to his mother for safekeeping, but later, when in their constant association she opposed him, he demanded, "I want my money back. I will go away from home. Now you give me my money back." Well, we had similar program when I was small. But one night, there was a tooth there, and the idea was, at least, the good fairy would come and take the tooth and leave some money. But that night I woke up in the middle of it and I found out the good fairy was my mother. That was the last time we did the good fairy business. When Rajani wanted her hair braided, she would regularly ask her daughters, but if Abai were present, he would insist on braiding it himself and would create such a disturbance that they would give in to him. Once he painted the bottoms of his feet red, imitating the custom of women who painted their feet on festive occasions. His mother tried to dissuade him, saying it was not for children, but he insisted, "No, I must do it also." Abai was unwilling to go to school. Why should I go? Why should I go, he thought. I will play all day. When his mother complained to Gormohan, Abai, sure that his father would be affectionate, said, "No, I shall go tomorrow." "All right, he will go tomorrow," said Gormohan. "That's all right." But the next morning, Abai complained that he was sick, and his father indulged him. His father let him stay at home. Rajani became upset because the boy would not go to school, and she hired a man for 4 rupees to escort him there. The man, whose name was Damodar, would tie Abai about the waist with a rope, a customary treatment, take him to school, and present him before his teacher. When Abai would try to run away, Damodar would pick him up and carry him in his arms. After being taken a few times by force, Abai began to go on his own. Abai proved to be an attentive, well-behaved student, though sometimes he was naughty. Once when the teacher pulled his ear, Abai threw a kerosene lantern to the floor, accidentally starting a fire. Krishna. Wow. In those days, any common villager, even if illiterate, could recite from the Ramayana, Mahabharata, or Bhagavatam. Especially in the villages, everyone would assemble in the evening to hear from these scriptures. It was for this purpose that Abai's family would sometimes go in the evening to his maternal uncle's house about 10 miles away, where they would assemble and hear about the Lord's transcendental pastimes. They would return home discussing and remembering them, and then go to bed and dream Ramayana, Mahabharata, and Bhagavatam. After his afternoon rest and bath, Abai would often go to a neighbor's house and look at the black and white pictures in Mahabharata. His grandmother asked him daily to read Mahabharata from a vernacular edition. Thus, by looking at pictures and reading with his grandmother, Abai imbibed Mahabharata. In Abai's childhood play, his younger sister, Bhavatarani, was often his assistant. Together they would go to see the Radha Govinda deities in the Malak's temple. In their play, whenever they encountered obstacles, they would pray to God for help. "Please, Krishna, help us fly this kite," they would call as they ran along, trying to put their kite into flight. Abai's toys included 2 guns, a wind-up car, a cow that jumped when Abai squeezed the rubber bulb attached, and a dog with a mechanism that made it dance. The toy dog was from Dr. Bose, the family physician, who gave it to him when treating a minor wound on Abai's side. Abai sometimes liked to pretend that he was a doctor, and to his friends he would administer, quote-unquote, medicine, which was nothing more than dust. Abai was enamored with the Rath Yatra festivals of Lord Jagannath held yearly in Calcutta. The biggest Calcutta Rath Yatra was the Malak's, with 3 separate carts bearing the deities of Jagannath, Baladev, and Subhadra. Beginning from the Radha Govinda temple, the carts would proceed down Harrison Road for a short distance and then return. The Malaks would distribute large quantities of Lord Jagannath's prasadam to the public on this day. Rath Yatra was held in cities all over India, but the original gigantic Rath Yatra, attended each year by millions of pilgrims, took place 300 miles south of Calcutta at Jagannath Puri. For centuries at Puri, 3 wooden carts 45 feet high had been towed by the crowds along the 2-mile parade route in commemoration of one of Lord Krishna's eternal pastimes. Abai had heard how Lord Chaitanya himself, 400 years before, had danced and led ecstatic chanting of Hare Krishna at the Puri Rath Yatra festival. Abai would sometimes look at the railway timetable or ask about the fare to Vrindavan and Puri, thinking about how he would collect the money and go there. So, Prabhupada, this is the thing that Prabhupada, even at this very young age, just small boy, as we were reading yesterday particularly, he's got such a natural attraction to Krishna in all sorts of different ways. In different literatures of ours, there are descriptions of different devotees like that. Maharaj Parikshit, the different of the Goswamis, Uddhava, that, for example, Jiva Goswami would, he had little Radha and Krishna, really little, just like little, these plastic toys you get for children. Little Radha and Krishna and little cowherd boys and little gopis. And all day he would arrange these different little toys in different ways, like they're taking part in actual pastimes. Yeah. So he'd move the cows around, the gopis. Krishna would go and spend time with the gopis, and so on and so forth. And yeah, so this is all coming from previous lifetimes, or you could say from the eternal nature of such elevated devotees. And Jiva Goswami, for example, and same with Maharaj Parikshit, he would be absorbed in all these different pastimes with his little deities, you could say, and his friends from the neighborhood would call to him, come and play, and he wouldn't come. But he would stay with his deities, engaging them in different pastimes. So the only time he'd go out and join them was immediately after he had done a food offering to Radha and Krishna. Then he'd take the prasad out and distribute it to the local children. Then he'd come straight back and get deeply absorbed in these pastimes with these little figurines. So Prabhupada was like that. Prabhupada was like that. Very special, transcendental person. So Abai wanted to have his own cart and to perform his own Ratha Yatra. And naturally he turned to his father for help. Gormohan agreed, but there were difficulties. When he took his son to several carpenter shops, he found that they could not afford to have a cart made. On their way home, Abai began crying, and an old Bengali woman approached and asked him what the matter was. Gormohan explained that the boy wanted a Ratha Yatra cart, but they couldn't afford to have one made. "Oh, I have a cart," the woman said, and she invited Gormohan and Abai to her place and showed them the cart. It looked old, but it was still operable, and it was just the right size, about 3 feet high. Gormohan purchased it and helped to restore and decorate it. Father and son together constructed 16 supporting columns and placed a canopy on top, resembling as closely as possible the ones on the big carts at Puri. They also attached the traditional wooden horse and driver to the front of the car. Abai insisted that it must look authentic. Gormohan bought paints, and Abai personally painted the cart, copying the Puri originals. His enthusiasm was great, and he became an insistent organizer of various aspects of the festival. But when he tried making fireworks for the occasion from a book that gave illustrated descriptions of the process, Rajani intervened. Krishna, Krishna. Abai engaged his playmates in helping him, especially his sister Bhavatarani, and he became their natural leader. Responding to his entreaties, amused mothers in the neighborhood agreed to cook special preparations so that he could distribute the prasadam at his Rath Yatra festival. Like the festival at Puri, Abai's Rath Yatra ran for 8 consecutive days. His family members gathered, and the neighborhood children joined in a procession, pulling the cart, playing drums and kartals and chanting. Wearing a dhoti and no shirt in the heat of summer, Abai led the children in chanting Hare Krishna and in singing the appropriate Bengali bhajan, Ki kara roy kamalini. What are you doing, Srimati Radharani? Please come out and see. They're stealing your dearmost treasure, Krishna, the black gem. If the young girl only knew, the young boy Krishna, treasure of her heart, is now forsaking her. Now, that's the background to the festival. Anyway, yeah. Krishna leaves the goddess of fortune and goes on the Rath Yatra. Anyway, Abai copied whatever he had seen at adult religious functions, including dressing the deities, offering the deities food, offering arti with a ghee lamp and incense, and making prostrated obeisances. From Harrison Road, the procession entered the circular road inside the courtyard of the Radha Govinda temple and stood a while before the deities. Seeing the fun, Gormohan's friends approached him. Why haven't you invited us? You're holding a big ceremony and you don't invite us. What is this? They're just children playing, his father replied. Oh, children playing, the men joked. You're depriving us by saying that this is only for children? While Abai was ecstatically absorbed in the Rath Yatra processions, Gormohan spent money for 8 consecutive days, and Rajani cooked various dishes to offer, along with flowers, to Lord Jagannath. Although everything Abai did was imitation, his inspiration and steady drive for holding the festival were genuine. His spontaneous spirit sustained the 8-day children's festival, and each successive year brought a new festival, which Abai would observe in the same way. We just see from childhood, Srila Prabhupada's just deeply absorbed transcendentally, very deeply absorbed. Not watching television or playing computer games, no computer games. When Abai was about 6 years old, he asked his father for a deity of his own to worship. Since infancy, he had watched his father doing puja at home and had been regularly seeing the worship of Radha Govinda and thinking, when will I be able to worship Krishna like this? On Abai's request, his father purchased a pair of little Radha Krishna deities and gave them to him. From then on, whatever Abai ate, he would first offer to Radha and Krishna, and imitating his father and the priests of Radha Govinda, he would offer his deities a ghee lamp and put them to rest at night. Abai and his sister Bhavatarani became dedicated worshippers of the little Radha Krishna deities, spending much of their time dressing and worshipping them, and sometimes singing bhajans. So his younger sister Bhavatarani, she became known as Pashima, and he had his other brothers and sisters. I'm not even sure how many. Earlier it was said there were 4 sisters, but there was at least 1, maybe 2 brothers also. And this Bhavatarani, Pashima, she was the closest to Prabhupada. I never heard of his other brothers or sisters like visiting him in Mayapur or wherever. I don't know if it happened, but I never heard of it happening. But Pashima, oh yes, she would, when Prabhupada was in Mayapur particularly, then she would be there. And she would cook for Prabhupada, real, like, authentic Bengali style. Lot of mustard oil. That sounds really pretty strong. And Prabhupada would take it. And their stories, in fact, later on as we go through the Lilamrita, we'll come to stories like Pashima cooks for Prabhupada, and it's really spicy and oily and, and it wasn't really good for Prabhupada. So, the devotees would serve it to Prabhupada, and Prabhupada would complain that why does she do this? And what? It's not good for me. And so the devotees would try to stop her. The next day they'd tell her, no, please don't cook for Prabhupada. And she would go and complain to Prabhupada. And Prabhupada would say, I didn't tell them that. And he'd call in the devotees and chastise them. That, why are you saying like that? And whenever she comes, she can cook whatever she likes. So she was a real character, actually. She was a real character. Prabhupada was short, quite short. And she was shorter than Prabhupada. And she was very plump. So Prabhupada sometimes would call her the fat one. And he'd say, where's the fat one? Oh, yeah. So their brothers and sisters laughed, because now Prabhupada and Pashima or Bhavatarani, Pashima means aunt. So Abai and her, they would worship these little Radha Krishna deities and really get into it. But their brothers and sisters laughed, teasing Abai and Bhavatarani by saying that because they were more interested in the deity than in their education, they would not live long. But Abai replied that he didn't care. Once a neighbor asked Abai's mother, "How old is your little son?" "He's 7, she said, as Abai listened with interest. He had never heard anyone discuss his age before, but now he understood for the first time, "I am 7. In addition to the education Abai received at the kindergarten, to which he had at first been forcibly dragged, he also received private tutoring at home from his 5th year to his 8th. He learned to read Bengali and began learning Sanskrit. Then in 1904, when he was 8 years old, Abai entered the nearby Matilal Seal Free School on the corner of Harrison and Central Roads. Matilal was a boys' school established in 1842 by a wealthy Suvarnavanik Vaishnav. The building was stone, 2 stories, and surrounded by a stone wall. The teachers were Indian, and the students were Bengalis from local Suvarnavanik families. Dressed in their dhotis and kurtas, the boys would leave their mothers and fathers in the morning and walk together in little groups, each boy carrying a few books and his tiffin. Tiffin means his lunchbox. Inside the school compound, they would talk together and play until the clanging bell called them to their classes. The boys would enter the building, skipping through the halls, running up and down the stairs, coming out to the wide front veranda on the 2nd floor, until the teachers gathered them all before their wooden desks and benches for lessons in maths, science, history, geography, and their own Vaishnav religion and culture. That's interesting. Classes were disciplined and formal. Each long bench held 4 boys who shared a common desk with 4 inkwells. If a boy were naughty, his teacher would order him to stand up on the bench. A Bengali reader the boys studied was the well-known Folk Tales of Bengal, a collection of traditional Bengali folk tales, stories a grandmother would tell local children, tales of witches, ghosts, tantric spirits, talking animals, saintly Brahmins, or sometimes wicked ones, heroic warriors, thieves, princes, princesses, spiritual reincarnation, and virtuous marriage. In their daily walks to and from school, Abai and his friends came to recognize, at least from their childish viewpoint, all the people who regularly appeared in the Calcutta streets, their British superiors traveling about, usually in horse-drawn carriages, the hackney drivers, the bungies who cleaned the streets with straw brooms, and even the local pickpockets and prostitutes who stood on the street corners. Abai turned 10 the same year the rails were laid for the electric tram on Harrison Road. He watched the workers lay the tracks, and when he first saw the trolley car's rod touching the overhead wire, it amazed him. He daydreamed of getting a stick, touching the wire himself, and running along by electricity. Sure. Although electric power was new in Calcutta and not widespread, only the wealthy could afford it in their homes, along with the electric tram came new electric street lights, carbon arc lamps, replacing the old gas lights. Abai and his friends used to go down the street looking on the ground for the old used carbon tips, which the maintenance man would leave behind. When Abai saw his first gramophone box, he thought an electric man or a ghost was inside the box singing. Abai liked to ride his bicycle down the busy Calcutta streets. Although when the soccer club had been formed at school, he had requested the position of goalie so that he wouldn't have to run, he was an avid cyclist. Oh, listen to that. Prabhupada played soccer. Wow. Shh. That's a justification, isn't it? Let nobody criticize you for playing sports. Anyway, he's just a child. A favorite ride, so he was an avid cyclist. A favorite ride was to go south towards Dalhousie Square, with its large fountains spraying water into the air. That was near Raj Bhavan, the Viceroy's mansion, which Abai could glimpse through the gates. Riding further south, he would pass through the open arches of the Maidan, Calcutta's main public park, with its beautiful green flat land spanning out towards Chowrangi and the saintly buildings and trees of the British Quarter. The park also had exciting places to cycle past: the racetrack, Fort William, the stadium. The Maidan bordered the Ganges, known locally as the Hooghly, and sometimes Abai would cycle home along its shores. Here he saw numerous bathing ghats with stone steps leading down into the Ganges, and often with temples at the top of the steps. There was the burning ghat, where bodies were cremated, and close to his home, a pontoon bridge that crossed the river into the city of Howrah. At age 12, though it made no deep impression on him, Abai was initiated by a professional guru. The guru told him about his own master, a great yogi, who had once asked him, "What do you want to eat?" Abai's family guru had replied, "Fresh pomegranates from Afghanistan." "All right," the yogi had replied, "go into the next room." And there he had found a branch of pomegranates, ripe as if freshly taken from the tree. A yogi who came to see Abai's father said that he had once sat down with his own master and touched him, and had then been transported within moments to the city of Dwarka by yogic power. Okay. Gormohan did not have a high opinion of Bengal's growing number of so-called sadhus, the non-devotional impersonalist philosophers, the demigod worshippers, the ganja smokers, the beggars. But he was so charitable that he would invite the charlatans into his home. Every day Abai saw many so-called sadhus, as well as some who were genuine, come to eat in his home as guests of his father. And from their words and activities, Abai became aware of many things, including the existence of yogic powers. At a circus, he and his father once saw a yogi tied up hand and foot and put into a bag. The bag was sealed and put into a box, which was then locked and sealed, but still the man came out. Abai, however, did not give these things much importance compared with the devotional activities his father had taught him, his worship of Radha Krishna, and his observance of Ratha Yatra. Let's see. We'll continue for a little while. Hindus, well, let me just have a look here. Okay. Hindus and Muslims lived peacefully together in Calcutta, and it was not unusual for them to attend one another's social and religious functions. They had their differences, but there had always been harmony. So when trouble started, Abai's family understood it to be due to political agitation by the British. Abai was about 13 years old when the first Hindu-Muslim riot broke out. He did not understand exactly what it was, but somehow he found himself in the middle of it. Srila Prabhupada. All around our neighborhood on Harrison Road were Mohammedans. The Malik house and our house were respectable. Otherwise, it was surrounded by what is called Kasbah and Basti. So the riot was there, and I had gone to play. I did not know that the riot had taken place in Market Square. I was coming home, and one of my class friends said, "Don't go to your house. That side is rioting now." We lived in the Mohammedan quarter, and the fighting between the two parties was going on. But I thought maybe it was something like two gundas, hoodlums, fighting. I had seen one gunda once stabbing another gunda, and I had seen pickpockets. They were our neighbor men. So I thought it was like that. This is going on. But when I came to the crossing of Harrison Road and Holiday Street, I saw one shop being plundered. I was only a child, a boy. I thought, what is this happening? In the meantime, my family, my father and mother, were at home frightened, thinking, the child has not come. They became so disturbed they came out of the home expecting, wherefrom the child will come. So what could I do? When I saw the rioting, I began to run towards our house. And one Mohammedan, he wanted to kill me. He took his knife and actually ran after me. But I passed somehow or other. I was saved. So as I came running before our gate, my parents got back their life. So without speaking anything, I went to the bedroom, and it was in the winter. So without saying anything, I laid down, wrapped myself with a quilt. Then later I was rising from bed, questioning, is it ended? The riot is ended? When Abai was 15, he was afflicted with beriberi, some disease. And his mother, who was also stricken regularly, had to rub a powder of calcium chloride on his legs to reduce the swelling. Abai soon recovered, and his mother, who had never stopped any of her duties, also recovered. But only a year later, at the age of 46, his mother suddenly died. Her passing away was an abrupt lowering of the curtain, ending the scenes of his tender childhood. His mother's affectionate care, her prayers and mantras for his protection, her feeding and grooming him, her dutifully scolding him. Her passing affected his sisters even more than him, though it certainly turned him more towards the affectionate care of his father. He was already 16, but now he was forced to grow up and prepare to enter on his own into worldly responsibilities. His father gave him solace. He instructed Abai that there was nothing for which to lament. The soul is eternal, and everything happens by the will of Krishna. So he should have faith and depend on Krishna. Abai listened and understood. So that's the end of that chapter. We'll continue on tomorrow night. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.